current news podcast.
With Elu and Jesse.
Yes.
All right, everyone, buckle up, because today we are diving headfirst into the world of political promises.
Sounds intriguing.
We're talking about one of those ideas that sounds like it's straight out of a superhero movie, something you'd expect more from Tony Stark than a former president.
Okay, you've got my attention. What is it?
It's Donald Trump's American Iron Dome, a concept that has definitely sparked, well, let's just say a lot of debate.
Yes, that one.
We're actually diving into this because of an article you sent over from Mother Jones, and, well, they didn't hold back. They called it perhaps the most ridiculous Trump idea yet.
Yeah, that's pretty savage.
And that's saying something, right? I mean, we've covered some pretty out there concepts on this show, but this one seems to have really captured the, let's call it the imagination of the political landscape.
Yeah.
So before we get into the why and how and all the controversy, let's back up a bit. For those who haven't been following every Trump speech, what exactly is this American Iron Dome he keeps talking about?
Well, as is often the case with grand political pronouncements, the details are a little fuzzy.
That's putting it mildly.
But the general idea, at least from the way Trump describes it, is this. A literal dome, an impenetrable shield over the entire United States.
Wait, seriously, like a giant snow globe?
Well, he uses the phrase Great Iron Dome over our entire country a lot, so you can see where people get that image.
Okay, I can see it. It's definitely a vivid image. And what is this dome supposed to protect us from? I mean, everything.
It's not entirely clear, to be honest. He's talked about it in the context of preventing World War III, ending all wars even.
Yeah.
You know, classic Trump hyperbole. But yeah, the implication is that it would protect us from any and all threats, missiles, bombs, maybe even bad weather if you listen to him on certain days.
Right, right. So where did he get this idea? Did he see it in a movie? Is he drawing plans on cocktail napkins at Mar-a-Lago? Where does this Iron Dome concept even come from?
He's actually riffing on a real system, believe it or not.
Oh.
The term Iron Dome itself is a reference to Israel's missile defense system, which has been in place for a while now and has been pretty effective, at least in their context.
Right, I've heard of that. But isn't their Iron Dome designed for a much, much smaller area?
Exactly. And that's where the whole thing starts to fall apart when you try to scale it up to, well, the size of the entire continental United States. The Israeli Iron Dome is impressive, don't get me wrong, but it's designed to counter very specific threats, primarily short-range missile attacks coming from relatively close borders. And it works because Israel itself is relatively small, geographically speaking. We're talking about a country that's about, let me see, roughly 400 times smaller than the United States.
Wow, 400 times.
Yeah. So when you start talking about covering a landmass as vast as the U.S. with that kind of system,
Right.
well, you're talking about a whole different ballgame, technologically and logistically.
Yeah, it's a little different from protecting, say, Tel Aviv versus trying to cover everything from, like, New York City to Los Angeles with a giant invisible dome. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing the price tag on that would be a tad different too, right?
Oh, yeah, we're talking about an astronomical amount of money. But we can dive into the costs and all the reasons why this might not be the most practical idea in part 2.
Okay, so maybe swapping out my umbrella for a giant dome is not really an option. But let's talk about this astronomical amount of money you mentioned. What kind of price tag are we talking about here? Because I can only imagine this thing would make the cost of building a wall look like pocket change.
You're not wrong to think that. The Mother Jones article cites an estimated cost of, get ready for it, around $2.5 trillion.
Kidding, 2.5 trillion.
Nope, that's the figure they're throwing around. And for some context, that's roughly, let me see, about 3 times the entire projected military budget of the U.S. for, like, 2025.
Wow, okay. So let's unpack that a little bit. Why so expensive? I mean, I get that we're talking about a massive structure, but is it just the physical dome itself? What else is driving that cost up?
Oh, it's way more than just construction costs. You've got the materials, obviously, but then there's the research and development of the technology itself. Because remember, this isn't just a giant metal dome. It's this incredibly advanced detection and interception system.
Right, it's not like we're ordering this from some giant dome store online.
Exactly. And then you've got to factor in the ongoing costs, maintenance, staffing, constantly updating the technology to stay ahead of any potential threats.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time expense. It's a money pit, basically. And that's assuming you could even get it to work on that scale, which, frankly, a lot of experts doubt.
Right, and that's a whole other conversation. So we've established that this whole covering the entire U.S. with a high-tech dome thing is probably not the most practical idea. But I think it's worth digging into the why behind it for a second. Because clearly it's an idea that has for whatever reason, resonated with a certain part of the population. So is there any situation, any combination of threats where this kind of system would actually make strategic sense?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And to answer that, you have to look at the actual threats the U.S. faces. Now, the Mother Jones article makes the argument that the actual danger from the kinds of missiles this Iron Dome is designed to protect against those short to medium-range projectiles simply doesn't justify this kind of over-the-top defense system.
But wait, don't we already have missile defense systems in place? Like, aren't we already protected against those kinds of attacks?
We do have some systems, yes. In fact, the U.S. has a ground-based missile defense system primarily located in Alaska and California.
Right. Designed to intercept those long-range missiles, the ICBMs.
Exactly. So that end of the spectrum, those long-range threats, is theoretically covered, at least to some extent, although even the effectiveness of that system is debatable.
Okay, so where does that leave us with the American Iron Dome? What kind of threats is it supposed to be countering that our existing defenses don't?
That's where it gets interesting. The article points out something pretty crucial here, and it's this. As of right now, there are no known, no documented armed groups out there that have both the capability and the intent to launch missiles at the United States from within a range that this theoretical Iron Dome could actually intercept, which, remember, is only about 40 miles.
So it's basically a solution in search of a problem.
Kind of, yeah. Which leads to a really important question. Is this entire proposal actually about genuine national security concerns, or is it more about political branding?
Now, there's an interesting thought. What do you mean by branding?
Well, think about it. The phrase Iron Dome itself is very evocative.
Yeah.
It creates this image of strength, security, impenetrability. It's a powerful image, even if the practical reality, as we've been discussing, is much more complicated and probably impossible.
So it's like using a really catchy slogan, something memorable, to try and oversimplify what is actually a really complex issue, even if, the slogan itself doesn't quite line up with the reality.
Exactly. It's about creating a narrative, tapping into people's emotions, even if the logic behind it doesn't necessarily hold up under scrutiny. And that's something this Mother Jones article really makes you think about. It really highlights the importance of informed debate and critical thinking, even when you're talking about things that on the surface might seem kind of outlandish, because even if the American Iron Dome never actually gets built, these kinds of proposals, these big ideas, they have a way of shaping public perception and influencing policy decisions down the road.
Absolutely. And it's not just about this Iron Dome thing, right? I mean, this applies to so many political promises and these big ideas that get thrown around, especially during an election year.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a classic playbook, and we see it time and time again. This deep dive has really highlighted how important it is to really look beyond the surface of these grand pronouncements, these attention-grabbing ideas, and to really ask the tough questions. What problem is this proposal actually trying to solve? What are the real costs and benefits, not just the ones being presented in these speeches and sound bites? And maybe most importantly, who benefits from this narrative being out there, even if it never actually materializes into, a giant dome in the sky?
Right, because it makes you wonder, is the goal always really to solve a problem, or is it sometimes more about creating a sense of fear, a sense of vulnerability that only a specific candidate with their specific solutions can address?
Now you're getting to the heart of it. It's about recognizing that sometimes the way an issue is presented, the narrative that's being spun, is just as important, if not more so, than the actual issue itself. And that's a whole other layer of complexity that we, as citizens, as voters, need to be aware of.
It's like we need to be as skeptical of the solutions as we are of the problems being presented, right?
Exactly. Don't just accept things at face value. Do your own research, consult credible sources, engage in those difficult conversations, even when they're about something as seemingly far-fetched as a giant dome covering the country.
It's about being informed, being engaged, and not letting those critical thinking skills slip, no matter how tempting it might be to just kind of go along with a catchy slogan.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive on the American Iron Dome. It's been quite a journey going from superhero movie imagery to some really thought-provoking discussions about defense, politics, and the importance of, not checking our brains at the door.
Indeed. And for our listeners, if this deep dive has piqued your curiosity, don't stop here. Go out there, do your own research, look beyond the headlines, and see what you can uncover.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe your research will inspire the next deep dive. Until then, keep those minds sharp, and we'll be back soon with another topic that's got everyone talking.
Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Turn the dial to the daily news. Bringing voices, headlines, and shoes. We turn the dial to the daily news.